Rick and Morty is more than just a weird, wacky world. It's a collection of weird, wacky worlds within a collection of weird, wacky dimensions, which are also full of weird, wacky worlds. The whole show is weird, and wacky is the short version. The central premise from the dimension-skipping Rick at the center of the show is that nothing matters, and if one dimension is a drag, then you leave it behind, and it's best not to dwell on it. But just like a galactic hitchhiker needs to know where his towel's at, Rick also needs to know what dimensions are best. We can't give you a Rick like Rick all of the dimensions, but here's a guide to the better dimensions in the Rick and Mortyverse. There are two kinds of directors according to French film theory. There are the metteur en scène directors, we did say French film theory, who are technicians, who are stylistically invisible to the stories they direct. They direct the story they are given without placing any distinct or personal style to it outside the service of the story. Then there are the auteur directors, who leave a stamp of personal style to their work, something recognizable. Applied to showrunners, for example, Rick and Morty co-creator Dan Harmon has elements of meta-awareness in both his cult-hit sitcom Community and in Rick and Morty, which is to say that in varying degrees, the characters are aware they're on a show. See, you learned a thing, unless you already knew that thing. Cool. David Cronenberg is one of the auteur-style directors, and the stamp he has is body horror, movies that involve grotesque body transformations like his remake of the classic horror film The Fly. Somewhere in the Rick and Mortyverse, there is a Cronenberg world of body horror monsters. Well, there was until the Cronenbergian Rick and Morty accidentally turned everyone normal. Fortunately for Cronenberg, Rick and Morty, they were able to find another dimension that they could slip into without anyone else noticing that they had recently gone Cronenberg. There is one thing that Rick and Morty creators Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon say they won't do on Rick and Morty, and that's time travel. The reasoning is that they feel anything they could do with time travel has already been done. That restriction might seem awkward considering the show is based off and not even intending to be subtle parody of the main characters of Back to the Future series Doc Brown and Marty McFly. But just like how Rick lives, there are no hard and fast rules in Rick and Morty. Even though they won't do a time travel episode, there has been more than a little fiddling with time. In the first episode, Rick goes to a future dimension to get a cure for Morty's broken leg and stays too long, leaving him with only one charge on his portal gun. Or at least that's what he says. Rick also freezes time in order to give him, Summer, and Morty enough time to clean up after a raging party that saw both Rick's friends and Summer's and the entire house transported back and forth to another dimension. When Morty and Summer's uncertainty create multiple timelines, they encounter a fourth dimensional being who shows up to arrest Rick for stealing a time crystal and messing with time. Ricks need their Mortys. Yes, they do. This need for a Morty means that there are a few things that Rick also has to tolerate in order for his universe to work. Since Rick is his grandson, he needs his daughter to have kids, specifically Summer and Morty. In order for that to happen, his daughter Beth has to end up with this sad and pitiful Jerry Smith. Thanks to a romantic overture during a concert in the park of the music of Alan Silvestri, Beth has a moment of weakness, leading to Summer and the rough relationship between Jerry and Beth. While it might be a mystery even to Jerry and Beth why the two stay together, Jerry is an unfortunate necessity for a Rick. To deal with the occasional Jerry ending up in the middle of a Rick and Morty adventure, like Jerry stowing away or Rick simply forgetting that Jerry was even there, a Rick had a great idea. On an unregistered cross-temporal asteroid is Furp Rock Plaza, which is also the location of Jerryboree. It's where the Ricks of the Central Finite Curve can drop their Jerrys off while they go on an adventure. There's a Beth character, TVs they can make adjustments on, and a ball pit, because everything is better with a ball pit. While Beth and Jerry are seemingly an inevitable part of the multiverse, with several universes bringing the couple together to create a wide variety of Mortys to go with their Ricks, no matter what dimension they come from, Jerry and Beth have a rocky relationship at best. Maybe it's Beth's abandonment issues from her father leaving, or Jerry's general, Jerryness. They are a couple that is always on the verge. In fact, they spent most of the third season split up, but that's not before having several goes at trying to fix their broken relationship. Rick doesn't help much, what with his open hostilities towards Jerry most of the time and ultimately being the cause of the couple's split. But he does, out of love for his daughter and his need to use Jerry's garage as a home base for his operations, occasionally try to help out. One of those ways to help was to send Beth and Jerry to the best counseling center in the multiverse, Nuptia 4. No word on what happens on Nuptias 1 through 3. Of course, the best marriage counselors in the multiverse are no match for the kind of troubled couple that Beth and Jerry have become, and their manifested visions of each other end up destroying the place. Within the finite central curve, there are a lot of different kinds of Ricks, most of which have joined together in an organization known as the Council of Ricks. Since our Rick C-137, is the rickiest Rick of all, a government of Ricks is too much government for him. The Ricks in the council have different Rick-related jobs to enforce the rules of Rickdom, such as they are. This includes a militia of Ricks that occupy the Smith House when they become convinced that Rick C-137 has gone rogue. Among those Ricks is Ricks from dimension J19 Zeta 7, or as the other Ricks call him, Doofus Rick. What constitutes a doofus in a spectrum of Ricks is not the same kind of thing that would constitute a normal doofus though. Doofus Rick comes from one of the worlds where there is no Morty, so he was assigned a Morty from a universe where everyone looks like Eric Stoltz from the movie Mask. Doofus Rick is still able to make bakeless brownies for Jerry, and in fact gets along with Jerry, something no other Rick would even attempt. Which means that Doofus Rick might not be a doofus because he's not particularly smart, but because he's emotionally mature and empathetic. There really isn't bad ice cream. Well, in an episode of Iron Chef, one of the challengers made soft-shell crab ice cream that was probably pretty bad. Well, it's also a dish at New Orleans restaurant apparently. That's disturbing too. Anyways, while most ice cream not flavored by shellfish is pretty tasty, there has to be the best ice cream in the world. And if there's the best ice cream in the world, then it stands to reason that there is the best ice cream in the multiverse. Part of dimensional travel is knowing where the best stuff in the multiverse is, including where the best ice cream is. It just so happens to be a dimension where the Smiths' favorite interdimensional cable show, Ball Fondlers, is a movie franchise. Of course, after Rick and Morty have to skip out for a minute to fix Rick's ship battery, the ship, in an increasing confined protect summer mode, ends up negotiating a peace between the humans and a spider-like alien enemy, resulting in flies being included in the ice cream. Nothing stays perfect forever, sadly. Reality singing competitions are everywhere. There's idols and voices, and even one where celebrities dress up in an elaborate costume, while other celebrities try to guess who they are for some weird reason. In Europe, there's a massive multi-country songwriting contest that attempts to find the best new song each year, called the Eurovision Song Contest. Fortunately, none of these contests start with a giant rockhead breaking into the orbit of the planet and demanding to be shown what we got, especially since that act apparently can cause a massive geological event that can wipe out the entire music industry. Except for Ice-T, of course. The audition process was only the beginning of the peril for the participating planets. If your audition is accepted, your planet is transported to a dimension where the songs from various worlds compete to win or be destroyed. It sort of puts Simon Cowell being mean to someone during an audition in perspective, doesn't it? Rick's song Get Swifty doesn't save the world. That's left to Ice-T, who turns out is from another dimension himself, because why not? It's also temporarily a religion led by Morty's high school principal. Giant floating heads demand to see what you got are hard to interpret. While the whole thing with an infinite number of alternate realities is that there will be a wide variety of timelines, not just ones that produce a Rick, much less a Beth and then a Summer and Morty. Some worlds get off that track early and things end up in an entirely different destination. There have been a number of times in recent history that humanity has pulled itself back from the brink of destruction. Most of that has almost come down to almost dumb luck. There has been, especially since the 70s, a fascination with the idea that one of these times we're not going to do that, and what that world would look like. It's such a popular idea that there's even a yearly festival called Wasteland, where people play out a world where it all went south. Rick, Morty, and Summer end up visiting a Wasteland world, complete with an Immortan Joe type and a Thunderdome out of the Mad Max series. Summer ends up killing their leader and starting a relationship with his replacement. Except when Rick gives him unlimited electrical power, the Wasteland becomes a humdrum suburb in no time. Fortunately for the thrill seekers, Rick takes that power right back. There are a lot of little things that can end up making a big difference in the shape of the world. You go left instead of right, stay home instead of leave town, click on a Rick and Morty video instead of a Dragon Ball Z one, you know. Who knows how many alternate dimensions you just made? Think about it. Practically no one doesn't wonder what could have been had they just made a different decision at a key moment in their lives. Invariably, people assume that it would be better. Maybe it would have been, at least for a little bit. Maybe, but probably not. I mean, the reality where you didn't eat that chili dog with extra jalapenos probably has you with a little less upset stomach, but otherwise, the same. Thanks to the wonders of interdimensional cable, and a pair of goggles that Rick has that allow him to scan different realities, the Smiths get to see what would have happened if they didn't have Summer. They end up living successful lives, with Beth as a people surgeon and Jerry as a filmmaker. Unfortunately for Rick, Jerry and Beth really are meant for each other, and they end up coming back together again. With Rick as a guide, the multiverse is a pretty mysterious thing. Rick gives out information as he deems necessary, but the reliability of that information is suspect. He's either lied or withheld information as he sees fit to get what he needs out of those around him. The one thing we know about Rick in the spectrum of Ricks is that the Council of Ricks doesn't like him, and that he's Rick C-137. How the numbering system works or what the designations mean has never been explained, so we don't know what C-137 designates or why it's a simple number, unlike Doofus Rick's J19 Zeta 7. We do know that the dimension that the show starts out in with our Rick and Morty was actually converted into a Cronenberg world when Rick's love potion goes wrong thanks to it not mixing well with the flu virus. While this provides a convenient landing place for the Cronenberg Rick and Morty that turned their world into a normal person world, our Rick and Morty abandon it for a world where their Ricks solve the problem, but only to blow him and Morty up seconds later. But is this first world C-137? Or is this a trick our Rick has pulled more than once? As far as most people know, everything is as it has been in the current dimension that Rick and Morty live in. Rick saved the world from the giant floating heads, demanding a new hip song. Whatever turned Morty's classmates into a horde that was in love with him, then Mantis people, then Cronenberg monsters was solved, and there are two mysterious unmarked graves in the backyard where that dimension's former Rick and Morty are buried. Whether or not the original reality was C-137, the show certainly doesn't take place in C-137 now. That reality has seen the Galactic Empire take over the Earth and collapse once the currency was reduced to meaninglessness. It's also a world where Rick has started a personality war with the president that went so far that he had to pretend to be another Rick in order to end the feud. For whatever reason, Rick has committed to this particular reality. Even though this isn't his Beth, his Summer, or his Jerry, we don't even really know if this is his first Morty. The opening credits suggest he's lost at least one. Fans have theorized that evil Morty is in fact Rick C-137's original Morty, who got too smart for his own good. There's the easy way, the hard way, and the Rick way, which usually sounds like a really hard way to do something the easy way. People have been trying to make a more efficient and long-lasting battery for a while now, and they've come a long way. Lithium car batteries have nothing on the battery that powers Rick's car though. Like most of what Rick does, however, that does come with some ethical quandaries. In this case, it's that in order to power the battery, Rick has created a Microverse, complete with an alien people, who he has also introduced electricity to through stomp boxes that feed most of their power to Rick's ship. The only problem is that the people of that universe discovered a new source of power. You see, they created a Miniverse inside a battery and then introduced electricity to them via a series of cranks that bleeds most of its power to the battery in the Microverse. Unbeknownst to the Microverse scientist, a Miniverse scientist is working on a power alternative. It turns out that they're also creating a battery that has a small universe in it called a Teenyverse, and well, you get the idea. That right there is the Rick way to do things. Ricks by their very nature are generally up to no good. Even though Rick C-137 feels like the Council of Ricks has betrayed their very Rick nature by creating the Council of Ricks and thus a government of Ricks, and goes against the very nature of being a Rick, the Ricks of the Council of Ricks are still, well, Ricks. Rick C-137, by his estimation, is the Rickiest Rick there is, so he didn't need to join the Club of Ricks. And he and the artist formerly known as Rick have been thorns in the side of the Council of Ricks for a while. But the entire time there was a Rick that was off their radar. He was able to operate unseen, killing off a number of Ricks on his own, including the artist formerly known as Rick. In order for a Rick to hide from other Ricks, he'll need more than just a Morty. He'll need a team of Mortys covering a dome and being slowly tortured to mask his sinister presence. If that's not enough, it helps if he's not really a Rick at all, but a Morty controlling his Rick for his own unknown goals. There's an idea that Rick is an anomaly. His super genius and his discovery of the portal gun technology has created a belief that nothing matters. And in a multiverse that contains an infinite number, everything is pointless. Connections don't matter and relationships are only a means to an end. While certainly there is a bit of a disconnect with reality that happens once you've abandoned your life and taken over the life of the dead version of yourself because you're Grandpa Cronenberg, your last reality. No matter what Morty has seen, Morty still manages to retain some empathy for those around him, even if that empathy ends up misplaced as often as not. However, there are some indications that it might just be Rick. Rick describes himself as a wreck and then tells Beth that the acorn fell straight down. It turns out Beth has her own dark side, and in order to find a way to mitigate that dark side, Rick created Froopyland, a magical place where no harm could be done to Beth, and Beth couldn't do any harm, except that she trapped her childhood friend in there for decades. It gets really creepy from there. There's only so much you can do to stamp down that Sanchez madness, it turns out. There isn't much we know for sure about anything in the Rick and Morty universe, and frankly, that's part of what makes the show so fun to watch. If we take Rick at his word, nothing really matters, and there's always a way out, just 1 degree more off the Central Finite Curve that will remove whatever problem is bothering you, whatever the Central Finite Curve actually means. We do know that hidden from all the different universes of troubles that the Ricks get up to, there is one place they can go to pool their resources or monitor the activities of Ricks to make sure it doesn't blow back on the other Ricks. That place is the Citadel. Once it was home to the Council of Ricks, until Rick killed off the Council, who just sent a strike squad to kill him. Then Rick transported the Citadel into a Galactic Federation prison, starting a battle where both Rick C-137's enemies killed each other off. But the Citadel rebuilt, turning into a society of Ricks and their Mortys, including a democracy where the first president was even a Morty. Unfortunately for some, it was an evil Morty. Dun dun dun! We may see what he has in store for them yet. Those are some of the craziest dimensions in the Rick and Morty world, and that's only ones where something plot-oriented happened. Then there's the ones they just pass through, where pizzas sit on chairs of people and whatnot. What are your favorite Rick and Morty dimensions? Which ones do you want to return to? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, why not hit that subscribe button to transport your inbox to a dimension with the latest CBR videos? Thanks for watching!